Welcome, everyone, to the Montessori Family Life Series. We're so glad you're here today. If you are returning, welcome back. If you're new to this broadcast, welcome to our show and welcome for joining us. We are so fortunate, I am so fortunate, to have so many amazing guests that come onto our program with wonderful topics for parents. Today with me, my special guest is Christine Lowry. She has been with us quite a few times on the webinar. We've missed her for a little while. She's been doing some teaching and some other things, and so we're very glad that she's back. Christine has a master's in education, particularly in special education, and that's been a big focus of her career, is working with children, parents, teachers that the children have the special needs. She's really an expert in that field. She also founded and is the chief consultant for Montessori Now, and you can find that on the internet at montessori-now.com. Okay, and Christine, besides all that, she is also a Montessori certified teacher. She founded her own, I think, 2 Montessori schools during an earlier part of her career. And right now, what she mainly does is adult education. She consults and coaches private and public schools, and she works with parents as a coach. So, Christine, we're really happy to have you back with us again today. It's always your sessions are always very informative, and I always walk away with some new ideas and things that I hadn't known before. Also, Christine gets started. We have Tammy Willen with us. She runs Bay Montessori School in Maryland. They have opened back up, and so she is experiencing how we open schools during our COVID situation that we've got going on. And that'll probably come in handy with this conversation that we're going to be having with Christine. So, Christine, without anything, I would like for us to go ahead and get started.
Okay, great.
All right, I think we're ready to go now.
So, how do you make a decision whether you send your child back to school? I know that parents around the world are really agonizing about how to make that decision that is safe, that you feel comfortable with, that benefits your child. And so that's really what we're going to be looking at for the next several minutes here. So I want to encourage you to start with where you are. It's really important that we get in touch with our feelings about this. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot of anxiety and what if. And taking a look at that and knowing that that's normal and that that is typical gives you the opportunity to maybe step back a little bit and make some decisions and think about this in a way that isn't just responding to our fear from the limbic region of our brains, but that you can actually think it through and make really know that you're making a well-informed decision. The first article that is on the resource page is an article that was in the New York Times this past weekend, talking about just that, how difficult it is to make the decisions that are right for you and for your child, particularly when other families are making completely different choices. That makes it more difficult. You know, if we were all doing the same thing like some other countries have done, it would be easier because in a way the decision would be made for us. But the main point here is that you don't want to react out of fear. Be aware of your fear, understand that it's normal and natural, but that you can begin to move on from that. So the New York Times article does a really good job of actually interviewing some parents. There's a lot of great quotes in that article, How about parents expressing their self-doubt? I'm back and forth. How do I know? How do I know what I want to do? The conflicting data that we get, the news changes every single day. And so it's we have to be able to incorporate that while still staying at kind of an even keel so that we can assess it and really look at it. And then thinking about the emotional toll that takes. We have all been through considerable stress. And in fact, some writers are referring to it as collective trauma. And it's parents, it's professionals. I'm relatively sure, knowing Tammy, that she has spent a lot of time kind of thinking about how can I provide this benefit for our children, for their families, and do it in a way that's safe and healthy, and having to incorporate that.
Yeah. Not to mention, Christine, not to mention trying to do this in a way that stays as true as we can to Montessori. That's in our particular schools, that's an even bigger stressor for many administrators like Tammy and for the teachers that are in the schools, because our whole method, particularly with the little ones, is based on hands-on learning materials, being together with other children so they can learn to be how to be in community with each other. And so for the teachers and the administrators, they're trying to figure out, well, how do we do this with all these restrictions? Tammy, do you want to say anything about that? Because you're the one sitting here that's open to school. So how's it going?
Well, I'll speak to what Christine first said about knowing where you are. One of our parents that just came back last week, we've been open for 4 weeks now, and they just came back last week, and I talked with the parent and I said, really, what brought you back in? Why did you bring your kids back in? And she had an elementary student and a preschool student, and she just said, I finally decided that the negative impacts of continuing to isolate my children was much greater and much harder on them than the chance of negative impacts if they went back to school. And, I think that probably says where a lot of parents, some of you are right now, and we're all on our own timetable with when we make that decision. But I think ultimately that might be what a lot of us come down to. So in regards to opening, we just considered the best interest and safety of the child and the teachers on campus, as well as developmentally looking at where our children are and making sure that those two meshed, and that our restrictions and our requirements that we put on the classrooms and the teachers and the students didn't outweigh the quality that they were going to receive in the classrooms.
Thank you. Absolutely. So you both have essentially introduced the next thing that we need to think about once we're in touch with our own feelings, and we can get ourselves in a place where we can. You can't ever be objective about your own child, of course, but that we can be objective about the information and maybe be somewhat objective about the decision. So looking at what are the benefits of your child going back to school, and what are the benefits for you, for your child going back to school. And as Tammy was saying, that idea of looking at the risk assessment, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But what's really interesting is in this past week, the American Pediatricians Association came out with a really excellent statement. I feel like it was a really excellent statement. It's also on your handout. There's a summary of their statement that was published by NPR, and then the actual statement is there. It's an easy read. It's not full of scientific lingo or anything. But basically what the American Pediatricians Association has said is that schools are fundamental to children's well-being, to their social emotional well-being, to their ongoing development in academics, and that it gives many children an opportunity for physical activity that they might not have depending on where they're living. But this idea of the social emotional piece, our children have been out of school for anywhere from 4 to 6 months in the US. That is a significant amount of time for children to be away from peers, to be picking up on everybody's anxiety about what's going on, and the little ones maybe don't know exactly what or why or how, but they certainly can pick up on our emotions. That time of being away from each other has really been a huge stressor for children. And it has, you know, as Montessorians, we would all agree that children are always developing. However, we would also agree that the prepared environment is what we refer to it as, is the opportunity for the child to optimally develop. And I don't believe that our children have been able to optimally develop over this time. We made the decisions that we had to make for them to stay healthy. You know, there wasn't a choice. But now that we do have a choice, we can think about those. So I strongly recommend that you read that APA statement. It makes some really, really excellent points about how do you make this decision. Tammy, Lorna, any comments, anything you'd like to add to that?
I know that some people that are listening may not have their children in a Montessori school, but I think that other either childcare centers, daycares, private schools that are not necessarily Montessori are all facing these same issues. And you know, I think that the other thing that we want to acknowledge, if you do have a child in a private school or did have and now are thinking of returning, I know one of the factors that you probably are really kind of struggling with, thinking about, is that tuition and that commitment to a year of education when none of us know if we will, you know, be together all year long, or if at some point we will have to close the schools again. And I know the finances are a part of what we have to look at as families, as parents, and as schools, because schools don't run on air. they run, you know, with the money that you folks pay if you have a child in a private school. If you have a child in public school, and even public Montessori, we have magnet schools and we have charter schools. Luckily, I hope we have more and more of those that offer Montessori in a public school situation where you still pay taxes, but it doesn't feel like it's coming out of your pocket, you know, every week, every month, every whatever it is. And so that may not be as big a concern for folks who are able to have their children in a public situation. However, I think we all think about what will happen if our children go to school and then suddenly they close school again, and how will that affect their emotions and the trauma situation. So just to add a couple more things to the conversation.
Yeah. Tammy, I'm wondering if you could make any comments about what kind of reaction you've seen in your students who have returned.
It's run the gamut, really, from the young ones who are having to separate again. Those toddlers, 2s, 3s have had some difficulty with separating from mom and dad again because they've been with them for a while, but they all made it through. They all have returned to exactly how they used to be in our classrooms. The elementary, for the most part, the elementary kids were just so excited to see their friends. And we've gotten feedback from the parents that it's just been a blessing to their family, how everybody's getting along again better. and just the socialization that those kids are now getting. We haven't had one family that's come back and regretted it. Our parents have been very thankful and very excited and happy that they're back into the groove again.
Thank you. And that's absolutely consistent with the information that we're getting from schools all over the world. And from, and from other personal friends that we have. I have a good friend who teaches at a school in Houston, of all places, for right now. And he teaches a lower elementary class, and the way he describes those children getting together again is like, it's like waking up on a holiday morning. They were just so excited and so happy to be with each other. I think the other benefit that we need to think about too, as adults, is how many of you have been trying to work remotely and care for your child and feeling the stress and the pinch of, how do I manage this? I'm not an educator. I never thought I was going to homeschool my child. Not a choice I was going to make. I've still got responsibilities from work. And so I think making part of this decision is thinking about what you need for, as I've heard a number of parents say, for your mental health and for your ability to stress, the importance of you feeling like you can manage, that you have some control over your time and your schedule, has an incredible impact on your children. So it's not just a selfish thing to think about, well, if my child is at school, I'm going to be able to get my work done during the day. And then when my child comes home from school, I can devote more attention, undivided attention to them. And that's a really important consideration.
Absolutely. Christine and Tammy, we have a question from one of our listeners today. The listener says, at what age is socialization at school necessary for children, particularly for younger children? Either one of you want to comment on that?
I know what answer I would give. I wonder what answer Tammy would give. I would say that once a child is somewhat verbal and walking independently, that is the best time to begin having them be around other children so they can grow into what is that like. Amy?
I would agree with Christine. We have an infant toddler program, but our infant toddlers, and I'm a big encourager of this, our infant toddlers are working parents. It doesn't usually start until the 2-year-old classroom that they'll come in for the socialization aspect, a couple hours a morning. So I would say right around that 2-year-old year is when they are really beginning to search for that. They respond from to and from each other. And that socialization is something now that they can't get from just in the home. It's just an added bonus with more at school.
Yeah, and it's a are they going to fully develop social emotional skills at age 2? No, they're going to develop social emotional skills that are developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old, and that process of becoming aware of yourself and your own feelings and how to manage those. That process of becoming aware of other people have feelings too, and developing empathy and compassion for other people and how you manage relationships. That all can begin at a very, very young, 18-month to 24-month age, and it just continues to refine and improve and increase over the whole years of, through college. I mean, that's a whole different way of a whole different setting for social emotional growth and development in our young people. So, yeah.
And that's a whole nother area, Christine, that whole parents of college age students. They are, some of the colleges are opening. I have a great niece who's ready and eager to go back to college. She had to go home during spring, and the school that she's at, her regular classes will still be virtual, even though she's there. But her labs, because she's actually in pre-med, her lab work She will actually go on campus to the labs and do her lab work. So, and normally college kids are like together all the time. So, you know, that's a whole nother ball of wax. I don't think we're going to cover that one today, but there it is.
We could talk about that at some point. Dr. Montessori, I was pleased to find out when my daughter was of a certain age, that Dr. Montessori talked about the fourth plane of development, which is, I believe, 18 to 24. Is that right, Lorna?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so, you know, she saw that that was still a huge time of development for young people. So think about yourself, think about your child, and what would the benefits be to all of that? But here's some good news. We also need to assess the risks, right? We're in a pandemic. We can't lose sight of that to stay healthy. But now that we've gone through this for a number of months, there's more and more and more research on the impacts of COVID-19, in particular on children. So I've put up an article for you that comes from Technology Review, that is a review of a number of different studies worldwide. I also just this morning read an article in Atlantic magazine about the latest science, and I didn't have an opportunity to add that to the PDF. But if you Google Atlantic magazine for July, the article was written on July 2nd. The article will come up, and it is the latest research. And here's what we're finding out. Children are 50% less likely to contract the COVID virus than adults. Okay? In the entire United States, only 2%. Now, I understand 2% is a lot of kids. I get that. But only 2%, as opposed to, I don't remember what it is for adults, but it's much, 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 much higher than that. So we've got statistics that tell us that children are less likely to contract this virus. When they do, they generally have a very, very mild infection. They might not show a lot of symptoms beyond a runny nose and maybe being a little crabby, like they would be if they had a cold or an ear infection or something. But I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it. The research shows that children are highly unlikely to get such a complicated case of COVID that they would die from it. And the figure actually that is encouraging, though it's depressing, is 1 in 3 million children. That's the mortality rate for children. So, you know, we're looking at a different situation than you might be hearing on the evening news about the spikes that we're seeing in states and in cities across the United States. In the Atlantic article that I read this morning, and it also is verified by this other Technology Review article that you might want to read, is that the rate of transmission from children is also very, very low. Now that's in part because they're not getting it in the first place. If you don't get it, you can't transmit it. But in cases where children have tested positive for COVID-19, their rate of transmitting that to other people, like their grandparents, their family members, the concerns that we have all had, the research is showing that they are not what's called a vector for transmission. Doesn't mean that there still isn't a low risk, but the research that we're getting is much more positive than when this just kind of hit us and we all kind of reacted with that panic, with that fear, right? Now we're getting some knowledge behind this. So we know that the current rates of infection of children in the United States is extremely low. But if you have a child that has complications from health issues. You know, there are a number of children, particularly in my field of special education, there are a number of children that have underlying serious medical conditions. And so if that was your case in your family, then obviously you've got to think about this in a very, very different way. If you have, maybe you have a grandmother or a grandfather or both living in your home, and maybe they've got underlying health issues to be concerned about, then those are going to increase your kind of risk-benefit assessment. So that's why it's so important to look at this on each individual basis. My friends, your turn.
Oh boy.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there something you'd like to add, or do we have other questions maybe?
Well, I'm thinking again about children that are involved in athletics. This would be more the elementary and older children. The coaches and the people that work with children in athletics are really taking a big look at how that can work out. And again, particularly for children who may have some kind of a compromised immune system or other factors. My nephew, who is again going off to college, my great nephew, but he is a football player. And first of all, their trainings were supposed to start in July. Not sure if they are. Secondly, everybody's trying to figure out how we do this and how we do it safely with these kids. And he has another complication on top of that. He is actually a diabetic and has childhood diabetes. And so, you know, all of these factors that Christine was talking about with children who have some kind of compromised health situation, we have to look even more carefully at how we're keeping them safe, or as safe as we can. I mean, and that's the other thing, you know, people around the world are having people sign things that say, I'm not going to sue you if I get sick or if my child gets sick. Well, I really hope people don't have to sign papers. And I really hope they actually realize and recognize that the institutions that you're looking at for your children are doing the very, very best that they can to keep your children safe and healthy. They don't want your children to get sick any more than you do. I mean, you know, that's just not where we're at. So hopefully that's not going to be an issue in schools, because it's another added stress for the administration and the teachers if they're thinking, oh gosh, somebody might sue me if the child gets sick. I don't know. That's, you know, that's kind of beyond.
Well, in the Atlantic magazine article too, it specifically looks at the concern that has been expressed by teachers returning to the classroom. Am I going to catch it? And what we're finding out, what the research is telling us, is that, you know, if they're around other adults, they might catch it from another adult. But the likelihood that they're going to get it from one of the children in their classroom is very, very, very small. So again, going back to the APA article from the Pediatric Association, one of the things that I found interesting about that statement is that they recommend that children not wear facial coverings until middle school.
Wow.
That the benefit of wearing a face mask is mitigated by some of this new data that's coming out about younger children. And again, the negative side of having a younger child wear a face mask outweighs the slight chance that they could be a transmitter of the disease. So I found that really, really interesting. And then when they were talking about middle school students, it was primarily because they like to move in a herd. And you know, and they social distancing is like, what? Huh? No, that doesn't apply to me. So for a middle school student, you know, it's interesting that that's what APA is recommending.
I want to ask Tammy,
yeah.
have your teachers had to wear any special protective clothing or anything like that? You know, since you have opened your school?
So our teachers wear face masks. They wear gloves for certain things that they do, but they wear face masks anytime they're inside. Outside, they do not unless they go to give one-on-one care. We do not require it for our children. We will support it for a parent who wants the child to wear a mask if they are 5 and over, although most of our parents do not want their children wearing masks at school. I think one thing I want to point out though is, it's our responsibility as parents and as educators to know the facts, and to not share or to show our fear of situations that aren't really valid with our kids, because kids pick up on that so quickly. And they model what we do, and you don't want them afraid of touching someone. I mean, we made it very clear to our parents that came in that our kids may touch each other. It's just the nature of kids. They like to. And although we are social distancing and reminding them to keep their space, we are not policing their touching. So I just think it's good for us as parents to really watch and keep a check on our thermometer for how we're reacting to these situations.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. Thank you. So basically what we're talking about here is how do you assess the benefits and how do you assess the risks and what is the ratio? That's really what you're looking at. So where do you get the information that Tammy is talking about that we need? We need to stay up to date with information. So where do we get this information? One of the best places that you can get relevant, timely information is that each state has a website where they are posting policies and procedures for the state, where they are posting rates of infection and all of, there's any kind of data and statistics you might want to look for. So if you just Google the name of your state and then COVID-19, something like that will come up. It'll be some sort of a .gov, probably, website, and you can get a lot of information from that. I know I live in Colorado, and our website is updated daily. Our governor also has a very active Facebook page, and so I've started following him on Facebook, and there are updates on his Facebook page every day if you're a Facebook pager, and he likely has an Instagram account as well, but I don't do Instagram. So that's one way that you can get information, is to look at your state website. You also want to look at your county and your state Department of Public Health. And again, you would put in the name of your state and Department of Public Health. And you can get just reams of information there, again, about what they are recommending, what their thoughts are, how it's evolving. So that's a great place that you can get information. And then lastly, if you're seriously thinking about sending your child to the school they've been going to, or even to a new school, there are some questions that you can ask. And I'm going to look forward to hearing from Tammy on this. I'll give her a moment to think about it, but just throwing her in there. But talk with the school administrator or the school principal. Find out, what are their policies? What are their procedures? What are their protocols for cleaning, for instance, for disinfecting? You need to know that. What kind of health checks are being done on a daily basis? Are children having their temperature taken, or are they expecting you to take the child's temperature before you bring them to school every day? So that those health concerns, are they doing the best social distancing they can with children 12 and under? It's going to be extremely difficult. What about face masks? You can ask all those questions, and I believe that administrators are ready and willing and able to share that information with you. But you also want to try to look at things like, well, what kind of schedule is the school offering? I know some public schools are talking about offering a blended learning where a child is live in school every other day, and then on the off days, they're doing online learning. my opinion, and again, I want to hear from my colleagues here, is that for the younger children, consistency is so important. That if at all possible, if the children cannot be there for 5 days a week, that they be there on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 3 days in a row, let's say, rather than a day on, a day off, a day on, a day off. That would be very difficult for children 3 to 6, and it would be extraordinarily difficult for toddlers. So, comments, my friends? What do you want to add to that?
Well, let's check our audience here. Let's see if anybody has anything. Oh, I see a new one. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting one. What is the policy if a student's parents get COVID? Does the student stay home? Are the rest of the classroom parents notified?
That is an excellent question that you would want to ask the administrator or the principal, because each school is going to have its own policy about that. Some states have weighed in on what their policy they think it should be. Tammy?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what ours is, but it is different everywhere. I could speak for Maryland. And we do the health screenings in the morning with temperatures and several questions. And that is one of our questions, is has the child been exposed to someone with symptoms of or with COVID? And if that question's answered yes, then they are not admitted to care. So that is just part of our health screening process.
And I know some schools have policies, or at least at one time, we're thinking about writing policies. Well, what if a parent has to travel someplace by plane for work, or a family decides they're going to go to visit relatives or friends? Then what do you do? So those are questions that are made on an individual basis, and that's part of why it's so important that you gather the information that you need for your family, for your child, and what you are comfortable with. And I know that leaders of schools, particularly right now, are going to be very receptive to having those conversations with you. So the last little thing I'd like to talk about here, with a little bit of time that we have left, is what can you do at home? Regardless of what decision you make, if you decide that, yes, the benefits outweigh the risks, we're going to have our child return to their school or to begin a new school, or you make the decision that that's not right for your family, there are some things that you can do at home to support your child. I refer you to the UNICEF article that's in the resources. Excellent, excellent article on ways that parents can support their children at home. And first of all, making sure that we're teaching our children health habits and that we're building them into kind of a routine. So the obvious things like the hand washing, we're just going to make that part of the time that the child is at home. When they get home from school, oh, let's go wash our hands. Before we have meals, let's go wash our hands. You can teach a child to cover their cough or their sneeze. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have COVID. It might mean that they're suffering from allergies, but just teaching them to cough into their elbow. And 2-year-olds can learn to do that. It's about consistency. It's about modeling it, teaching it, and then reminding them. You can, that little itchy nose thing, it's coming. Like, oh, put your elbow up if it's a little one. Make sure that your child's getting enough sleep. Make sure that your child has a healthy diet. And this is really important. American children generally do not get enough time outside every day. And especially during this time, we know that being outside is more or less a safe place. Unless you are in a great big crowd that is close together, being outside is considered to be a safe space. If your child could have at least 1 hour a day outside, if you don't have a yard, if you have a park nearby, or just go for a walk, and it'd be good for you too. Listen, engage, pay attention to not just the words that your child is saying, but how they're saying it. What is their body language telling you? What is their facial expression and their voice tone and the pace at which they are talking? Are they talking really, really fast? And even if they're talking about something lovely, but they're talking really, really fast, you might stop and think, huh, I wonder if my child's feeling a little bit anxious. And I'm hearing that. So this idea of really paying attention with the way we observe our children, the way we listen to our children, and the way that we are prepared to have the conversations that we might feel are difficult to have, but having an honest conversation with your child based on, their vocabulary level and their understanding level, and you know that, but answering their questions, giving them the minimal amount of information that they need to feel more comfortable. And as Tammy so beautifully said earlier, that idea of getting in touch with our own feelings, and even if we need to do some co-regulating exercises like deep breathing, we know more and more and more that children mirror what they pick up that adults are feeling. And so it's really, to the very best of our ability, it's important when we have a moment alone or when we're around our children to just check in with yourself. And if you're starting to feel tense, you're starting to notice it in your body, just take a moment to relax your shoulders. Take a moment to take some deep breaths. And try to see what might look like on the surface as misbehavior in your child. Try to see that as stress behavior. Daniel Siegel, I know we're running over. Daniel Siegel has written a wonderful new book called The Power of, something like The Power of Being There or The Power to Know, but it's, look up Daniel Siegel 2020. And what he talks about is that our job as adults and as parents is to help our children feel safe, to help them feel like they're being seen, to help them soothe, to give them the comfort that they need. And for an older child, that might be a conversation, might be a hug too, and to help them feel secure. So safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And if we can focus on what Dr. Siegel calls those 4 S's, I think it can help us kind of keep in mind, oh, this is what I need to be doing right now. So hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much, Lorna and Tammy, for all of your contributions to the conversation.
You are very welcome, Christine. As usual, this session has been packed with good information for parents. I hope those of you that have been listening have not only enjoyed it, but gotten some resources and things that you might need. We do have one question that has been there for a while, and the question is aimed at Tammy, and it is, have you been able to take back all of your students? In other words, I think what the parent is, or the participant is thinking, is like, if you used to have classes with, let's say, 25 children in them, are you able to take 25 children back into those classes, or have you had to cut the size?
Well, we made a natural shift of starting during when our summer camps started. We run a traditional school year and then summer camp. So all of our kids don't come in the summer. We initially opened our doors an essential center, only serving essential personnel children. And then 2 weeks later, that restriction was lifted and we opened the doors to anybody filling our capacity of a 15 people per room. That's 13 children and 2 staff in our preschool ages and up. And we are almost full to that, but not yet. So I feel like we had an influx of parents that all wanted to come back right at first. And then the rest didn't yet. So that's where we sit.
Okay. Well, that sounds encouraging.
And again, that number in some states, it's a requirement of how many children you can have in a group, or the new term that's being used now is a pod. How many children you can have in a pod. And in some states, like again, in Colorado, daycare centers have to limit the group size to 10 children and 1 adult, but the public early childhood classrooms can have 30.
Wow.
I know, go figure. I don't know.
It's hard to
Gather
know.
your information.
I was going to say, as Christine said, make sure you're finding out the facts,
Right.
that you're not living just fearful because you don't have the facts. When you know, you feel better. So that's the way to go with that. Thank you both, Christine and Tammy, for joining me today. Thank you all for coming and participating. We really appreciate it. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.